The person they thought was just another traveler was someone whose decisions helped shape the future of the nation. The morning rush at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport moved like a carefully timed machine. Travelers carried coffee cups through crowded terminals, families checked departure boards, and business professionals hurried toward their gates. Among the thousands of people moving through the airport was a woman who appeared completely ordinary at first glance. She carried a small travel bag, walked with confidence, and moved through the terminal without a large group surrounding her. Her name was Dr. Amelia Brooks, but most people around her had no idea who she was. To them, she was simply another passenger beginning a busy day. They could not see the years of public service behind her calm expression. They could not see the responsibility she carried as a United States Senator. They could not see the countless hours she had spent working on decisions that affected millions of Americans. Sometimes the most powerful people in a room are the ones who do not need to announce their importance. Across the terminal, Officer Michael Carter began his shift as an airport police officer. He was a white officer who took pride in his role and believed strongly in the responsibility represented by his badge. To Michael, airport security was about awareness, preparation, and protecting the public. Every day brought different situations, and he believed his experience helped him recognize problems before they became larger issues. That morning, he noticed Amelia near a restricted access area. From his perspective, something seemed unusual. He did not know her background. He did not know her position. He only knew what he could see in that moment. And sometimes, what people see first can create assumptions before the full truth has a chance to appear. Amelia noticed the officer approaching but remained calm. She understood that moments like this often revealed more than just the situation itself. They revealed how people responded when they did not have all the information. Throughout her career, she had learned that patience could be more powerful than confrontation. She knew that respect was not something a person should receive only after proving their importance. Respect should exist from the beginning. Michael approached with the confidence of someone carrying official authority. His uniform represented a system built on rules and procedures. But standing in front of him was someone who understood those rules at a much deeper level. Neither of them knew that this ordinary airport encounter would soon become a moment remembered by many people. Neither knew that security cameras above the terminal were quietly recording every detail. The cameras did not know titles. They did not know political positions. They did not know who had influence and who did not. They simply captured what happened. At that moment, Michael believed he was evaluating a situation. He believed he was doing his job. Amelia understood that something else was happening. She understood that the way people are treated before their identity is known often reveals the most important truths. The terminal continued moving around them. Flights departed. Announcements echoed through the building. Travelers continued their journeys. But inside that busy airport, a moment was beginning that would challenge assumptions, test responsibility, and reveal that true authority is not always the authority people can immediately see. The most important moments are often the ones that begin quietly, before anyone realizes the impact they will have. Inside the busy terminal at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the interaction between Officer Michael Carter and Dr. Amelia Brooks continued to develop while thousands of travelers moved around them unaware of what was happening. To most people nearby, it looked like a routine security conversation. But beneath the surface, something much deeper was taking place. Michael stood with the confidence of someone who had spent years learning the responsibilities of law enforcement. His badge represented order, procedures, and public trust. He believed that careful observation was one of the most important parts of his job. When he noticed Amelia near the restricted access area, he focused on the details. Available to him, he saw a traveler. He saw an unusual situation. He did not yet see the person behind the moment. Amelia remained calm as the conversation continued. She understood that people often make decisions based on incomplete information. Throughout her years of public service, she had seen how quickly assumptions could influence actions. She knew that a person's appearance, location, or circumstances could never tell the entire story. That understanding allowed her to remain patient. She did not rush to explain her position. She did not immediately mention that she was a United States Senator. She wanted the situation to reveal itself naturally. For Amelia, the most important question was not whether people recognized her title. The important question was whether people offered the same respect before knowing who she was. Michael noticed that Amelia's response was different from what he expected. She was not trying to avoid the conversation. She was not attempting to use status as a shortcut. She was simply communicating with confidence and respect. That created a moment of uncertainty for Michael because the situation did not match the assumptions he had formed. Around them, the airport continued operating normally. Travelers checked their schedules. Announcements echoed through the terminal. Employees guided passengers toward their destinations. Life continued moving at full speed while a significant moment unfolded in a small part of the airport. Above them, security cameras quietly captured everything. They recorded the conversation without knowing the identities of the people involved. They did not recognize a senator. They did not recognize a police officer. They simply preserved the details of the encounter. Michael believed he was gathering information about Amelia. But the longer the interaction continued, the more the situation revealed something about Michael himself. It revealed how he approached uncertainty and how he responded when a person did not fit the expectations created by a first impression. Amelia understood that moments like this were rarely only about one conversation. They reflected larger ideas about trust, fairness, and responsibility. She knew that authority was not only measured by a title or a uniform. It was measured by how people chose to use their position when faced with someone they did not fully understand. Neither Michael nor Amelia knew what would happen next. Neither knew that this ordinary airport encounter would soon attract attention far beyond the terminal. But the cameras continued recording, the truth continued unfolding, and the distance between assumption and reality was becoming smaller with every passing moment. The truth behind a person is often hidden until a moment forces others to look beyond what they first believe. Inside Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the conversation between Officer Michael Carter and Dr. Amelia Brooks continued while the busy terminal moved around them. Thousands of travelers passed by without knowing that a quiet interaction was revealing important lessons about perception, responsibility, and the difference between visible power and true authority. Michael remained focused on his role. He believed that every situation required attention and careful judgment. His years as an airport police officer had taught him the importance of following procedures and protecting public safety. The badge on his uniform represented a responsibility he took seriously. But every person who carries authority eventually faces moments where knowledge and experience must be balanced with understanding. Amelia recognized that balance because her entire career had been connected to the law and public service. As a United States Senator, she understood how decisions could affect people's lives. She had spent years studying problems, listening to different perspectives, and working through complicated situations where the full truth was rarely visible at first glance. That experience allowed her to remain composed. She understood that the way people respond before knowing someone's identity often reveals more than their words. Michael continued asking questions, trying to understand the circumstances in front of him. He expected answers that would quickly explain the situation. Instead, Amelia's calm approach created a different kind of conversation. She was not attempting to avoid responsibility. She was showing that cooperation and dignity could exist together. The difference between them became clearer with each passing minute. Michael represented authority that people immediately recognized. His uniform and badge communicated his position before he said anything. Amelia represented authority that was invisible at first. Her influence came from years of experience, knowledge, and dedication to public service. It was not something a person could see simply by looking at her. The security cameras above the terminal continued capturing the encounter. They recorded the details without assumptions or opinions. They did not know Amelia's political position. They did not know Michael's professional background. They only preserved the reality of what happened. That footage quietly became the most neutral witness in the entire situation. Around them, the airport continued its normal rhythm. Travelers moved between gates. Employees assisted passengers. Announcements filled the air. The world outside that small area continued without knowing that an important lesson was unfolding. Michael believed he was evaluating a situation involving someone he did not know. But slowly, the moment began revealing something about how people make judgments. It showed how quickly a person can form conclusions without understanding the complete story. Amelia knew that moments like this were opportunities for reflection. She did not see the encounter as a chance to display her position. She saw it as a chance to observe how responsibility was carried by someone with authority. Neither of them knew that the next few moments would bring new information that would change the entire meaning of the encounter. The truth was still hidden, but the evidence was already being preserved. And soon, the person Michael thought he was questioning would become the person who revealed the greatest lesson about respect, fairness, and justice. The moment when hidden truth begins to emerge is often the moment when people realize that their first impression was incomplete. Inside Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the conversation between Officer Michael Carter and Dr. Amelia Brooks reached a point where the situation started changing in ways neither of them expected. What had appeared to be a routine security interaction was becoming something much larger, a reflection of how assumptions can shape decisions before all the facts are known. Michael continued to approach the situation through the perspective of his training. He believed in procedures, awareness, and the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. Every day, he faced different circumstances that required him to make decisions quickly. He knew that airport security depended on officers who paid attention to details and took their responsibilities seriously. But there was one lesson that experience alone could not always teach. Sometimes the most important detail is the person standing in front of you. Amelia remained composed as the conversation continued. She understood that moments of uncertainty often reveal character more clearly than moments of comfort. She had spent years working within the government and understood the importance of fairness in every decision. She knew that a position of authority should never be used to demand special treatment. Instead, true leadership meant allowing facts and principles to guide the outcome. As the minutes passed, small details began creating a different picture. Amelia's confidence, her knowledge of procedures, and her ability to communicate calmly did not match the assumptions that had formed at the beginning. Michael started noticing that the situation was more complicated than he originally believed. He was not only trying to understand who she was. He was beginning to question whether he had understood the situation correctly from the start. Above the terminal, security cameras continued recording every second. They captured the conversation, the expressions, and the choices made by both individuals. The footage did not know about titles or positions. It did not know that Amelia was a United States Senator. It did not know that Michael was a police officer trying to perform his duties. It simply recorded the truth as it happened. Then, a subtle change occurred. A nearby airport employee looked toward Amelia and paused. There was something familiar about her. The employee quietly checked information that had not been considered before. The discovery was not dramatic or loud. It was simply a moment when reality began catching up with assumptions. The employee recognized that the person standing there was not an ordinary traveler. She was someone whose work affected conversations happening far beyond the airport walls. Michael noticed the change in the atmosphere. The confidence he had carried earlier began to shift into curiosity. He realized that there were details about this situation he did not yet understand. Amelia watched the realization begin without showing anger or satisfaction. She had no desire to embarrass anyone. She only wanted the truth to be recognized. Around them, the airport continued operating as normal, but within that small space, the balance of understanding had changed. The officer who believed he was uncovering the truth was now discovering that the truth had been standing in front of him all along. And as more information prepared to come forward, the meaning of the encounter was about to change forever. The truth does not always arrive with a dramatic announcement. Sometimes it appears quietly, through a single confirmation, a simple conversation, or a moment when people finally see what was there from the beginning. Inside Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the situation between Officer Michael Carter and Dr. Amelia Brooks reached that turning point. The assumptions that shaped the beginning of the encounter were beginning to fade as new information came into focus. The nearby airport employee carefully reviewed the details and confirmed what many people around them did not know. The woman standing calmly in the terminal was not an ordinary traveler. She was Dr. Amelia Brooks, a United States senator whose work required dedication, knowledge, and a deep understanding of public responsibility. The revelation changed the atmosphere immediately. It was not because Amelia suddenly became more important. She had always carried the same value, the same experience, and the same dignity. From the beginning, the only thing that changed was that others finally understood what had been true all along. Michael stood quietly as the information reached him. The realization was not about discovering a powerful person. It was about recognizing that he had been speaking with a person who deserved respect before her title was ever known. He thought about the earlier moments of the interaction and began seeing them differently. Every question, every assumption, and every decision now carried a different meaning. Amelia noticed the change in his expression. She understood that this was not a moment for humiliation. It was a moment for reflection. Throughout her career, she had learned that meaningful progress came from understanding difficult situations and learning from them. She believed that people could improve when they were willing to examine their own actions honestly. The security cameras above the terminal continued recording the entire encounter. The footage showed something important. It showed that truth did not depend on a person's position being revealed. It showed that fairness should exist before recognition. The cameras had captured a moment when a person was judged without the complete story being known. They also captured a moment when the complete story finally began to appear. Around the airport, travelers continued moving toward their gates. Most people had no idea that a lesson about responsibility was unfolding nearby. But inside that small area of the terminal, Michael was beginning to understand something that extended far beyond this single interaction. A badge could provide authority, but it could not replace judgment. A title could represent influence, but it should not be the reason someone receives respect. Amelia's response made that lesson even clearer. She did not use her position to demand an apology. She did not seek attention from the people watching. She simply stood with the same calm confidence she had shown from the beginning. The difference was that now everyone around her understood why. The person who seemed unknown at first had never lacked importance. The only thing missing was recognition. And as the reality of the situation continued spreading through the airport, Michael began facing the most important question of the entire encounter. Had he been seeing the person in front of him, or only the assumptions he had created about her? The most difficult moments are not always the ones where people lose control. Sometimes, they are the moments when people are forced to look honestly at their own decisions and understand what those decisions reveal. Inside Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, Officer Michael Carter stood with a completely different perspective than he had only a short time earlier. The situation that first appeared simple had become a reminder that every interaction carries responsibility, especially when one person has the authority to make decisions that affect another person's experience. Michael looked back at the encounter with Dr. Amelia Brooks and began separating facts from assumptions. He realized that he had focused on what he could immediately see instead of considering what he did not yet know. His training had taught him to observe carefully, but now he understood that observation required more than noticing details. It required understanding context. Amelia remained calm as the attention around her increased. She knew that moments like this could become opportunities for change if people were willing to learn from them. She did not want the situation to become a personal conflict. She wanted it to become a conversation about fairness, awareness, and the responsibility that comes with authority. Her experience in public service had shown her that systems improved when people were willing to recognize weaknesses and work toward better decisions. Michael's colleagues began reviewing the available information, including the security footage from the terminal. The recording provided a clear timeline of the interaction. It showed the conversation, the questions asked, and the responses given. It did not create opinions or explanations. It simply preserved what happened. That made the footage important because facts are often strongest when they are allowed to speak for themselves. As the review continued, Michael started thinking about the meaning of his badge. For years, he had viewed it as a symbol of duty and protection. He still believed that, But he also began to understand that a badge carried another responsibility. It required humility. It required the ability to recognize when a person in front of him might have a story he did not know. Amelia noticed that Michael was beginning to reflect. She did not see him as an enemy. She saw a person facing a difficult lesson. She believed that accountability was not only about admitting mistakes. It was also about using those experiences to become better in the future. The airport continued moving around them. Travelers walked through security areas. Announcements continued across the speakers. The world outside their conversation remained unaware of the importance of the moment. But inside that terminal, something meaningful was happening. A person with visible authority was learning from someone whose authority had been hidden at first glance. Michael understood that the greatest challenge was not recognizing Amelia's position after the truth was revealed. The greater challenge was understanding that she deserved respect before anyone knew her position at all. And as the review moved forward, the question was no longer only about what happened at the airport. It became about what lessons could be taken from that moment and how those lessons could influence the future. The impact of a single moment is not always measured by what happens immediately afterward. Sometimes, the true effect appears when people begin asking deeper questions and looking beyond the surface. Inside Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the encounter between Officer Michael Carter and Dr. Amelia Brooks had moved beyond a simple misunderstanding. It had become a reflection of how decisions are made, how authority is used, and how important it is to recognize the person behind the situation. As the review of the security footage continued, more people began understanding the full picture. The recording showed a clear sequence of events. It showed the conversation between Michael and Amelia. It showed the calm way Amelia responded and the professional manner in which the situation developed. Most importantly, it showed that assumptions had influenced the beginning of the interaction before all the facts were available. For Michael, watching the footage created a different feeling than simply hearing a summary from someone else. He saw the moment from a perspective he had not considered before. He noticed the small details he had overlooked. He noticed how quickly he had formed an opinion without knowing the complete story. The experience was not comfortable, but it was necessary. Growth often begins when people are willing to examine moments that challenge their own understanding. Amelia continued handling the situation with patience. She knew that public attention could easily turn a difficult moment into a personal conflict, but she believed something more valuable could come from it. She believed that meaningful change happened when people focused on learning rather than simply blaming. Her years as a United States Senator had shown her that leadership was not about proving power. Leadership was about creating better outcomes from difficult situations. News of the incident began reaching officials who wanted to understand what had happened. The focus was not only on one conversation at an airport. It was about a larger question surrounding trust between communities and the people responsible for serving them. The security footage became an important piece of information because it allowed everyone to look at the situation based on facts rather than assumptions. Michael realized that his badge gave him the ability to make decisions, but it also gave him a greater responsibility to make those decisions carefully. Authority without understanding could create distance between people. Authority combined with fairness could build trust. Amelia's actions throughout the encounter showed a different kind of strength. She never needed to raise her voice to prove her importance. She never needed to demand recognition. Her confidence came from knowing who she was and understanding the values she represented. Around the airport, most travelers remained unaware of the lesson unfolding nearby. Flights continued, gates opened and closed. People moved forward with their daily lives. But for Michael, the moment would stay with him long after his shift ended. He had entered the situation believing he was evaluating someone else. Now he understood that the moment had also revealed something about himself. It had shown him the importance of looking beyond appearances, listening before judging, and remembering that every person carries a story that may be far greater than what is visible. The truth had been revealed, but the most important discovery was not who Amelia was. It was what Michael learned about the responsibility that came with his own role. The most meaningful changes often happen after the attention fades and people are left alone with their own thoughts. Inside Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the encounter between Officer Michael Carter and Dr. Amelia Brooks had already become more than a brief interaction. It had become a reminder that responsibility is not only about following procedures. It is also about understanding the people affected by those decisions. In the days following the incident, Michael continued thinking about what happened. He returned to the same questions again and again. What did he notice first? What information did he ignore? And how could a person become so certain about a situation before knowing the complete story? Those questions were difficult, but they were necessary. Michael had always believed that being a good officer meant paying attention. Now he understood that paying attention required more than observing what was visible. It required curiosity, patience, and the willingness to consider what might be hidden beneath the surface. Amelia continued her work with the same dedication she had shown throughout her career. She did not allow the situation to define her, because she understood that one encounter could never represent the full story of a person. She remained focused on the larger lesson. For her, the goal was not about creating embarrassment or seeking personal recognition. The goal was about encouraging a deeper understanding of fairness and respect. As discussions continued among officials, the security footage became an important reminder of the value of transparency. The recording did not show emotions or intentions. It simply showed actions and words. It gave people the opportunity to examine the moment carefully and understand how quickly assumptions could shape an interaction. Michael recognized that the badge he wore carried more than authority. It carried expectations from the public. People trusted officers to make decisions with fairness and professionalism. That trust was not maintained only through enforcement. It was maintained through empathy and careful judgment. The lesson stayed with him because it challenged the way he viewed his own role. He realized that true professionalism was not about always believing he had the right answer. It was about having the humility to learn when new information appeared. Amelia's approach also left an impression on those who learned about the encounter. She demonstrated that strength did not always come from using influence or demanding recognition. Sometimes strength appeared through patience, calm communication, and the ability to protect dignity during difficult moments. The airport eventually returned to its normal rhythm. Travelers continued arriving and departing. Employees continued helping passengers. The terminal became another busy place in a busy city. But for the people who understood what happened there, the moment carried a lasting message. Authority could be visible or hidden. A uniform could be recognized immediately, but character required time to understand. A title could open doors, but respect should come before any title is known. Michael had entered the terminal believing he was looking at a situation that needed his judgment. Instead, the situation had given him a lesson about judgment itself. And as he moved forward, he carried a new understanding that would remain with him. The most important responsibility of authority is not simply seeing what is in front of you, but taking the time to truly understand it. The greatest lessons are not always remembered because of the moment itself, but because of the change that follows afterward. For Officer Michael Carter and Dr. Amelia Brooks, the encounter at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport became more than a brief event in a busy terminal. It became a reminder that every interaction between people carries meaning, and every decision made by someone with authority can leave a lasting impact. After everything was reviewed, Michael understood the situation from a completely different perspective. He no longer saw it as a simple security matter. He saw it as a moment that revealed the importance of patience, awareness, and fairness. He realized that his responsibility as an officer was not only to protect procedures, but also to protect the trust that people placed in those procedures. A badge could give someone the ability to act, but wisdom determined how that ability was used. Amelia continued moving forward with the same quiet confidence she had shown from the beginning. She returned to her responsibilities knowing that the situation was never about proving who she was. Her value had never depended on recognition. Her position as a United States Senator was important, but it was not the reason she deserved respect. She deserved respect because every person deserves to be treated with dignity before their background, career, or achievements are known. That message became the most powerful lesson from the encounter. The attention surrounding the incident eventually focused less on one individual and more on the larger ideas behind it. People discussed the importance of fairness, accountability, and the need to look beyond assumptions. The security footage remained a quiet reminder that truth is strongest when it is supported by facts. It showed that a complete understanding of any situation requires more than a quick impression. It requires the willingness to listen and the patience to learn. Michael carried that lesson with him after the airport returned to normal. He continued wearing the same uniform and carrying the same badge, but his understanding of responsibility had changed. He knew that authority was not measured only by the ability to make decisions. It was measured by the ability to make those decisions with fairness and humanity. Amelia's response also became an example of a different kind of strength. She showed that dignity does not require anger, and justice does not require revenge. Sometimes the strongest response is the choice to remain calm while allowing truth to speak for itself. The airport eventually became just another location on a map. Travelers continued passing through its terminals every day. Most people would never know about the important lesson that unfolded there. But for those involved, the memory remained. It was a reminder that people are always more complex than the first impression they create. A person's appearance does not reveal their full story. A person's position does not determine their worth. And a moment of misunderstanding can become a moment of growth when people choose to learn from it. In the end, the most important discovery was not the identity of the person standing in the terminal. It was the realization that true justice begins when people choose to see each other clearly before making a judgment.